What's going on, everybody? Went out to a local nature preserve this weekend. Took my new Canon RP with its kit lens, the 24, the 105 millimeter. Links to the gear down below. Went for a little walkabout, shot a little wildlife and just some nature photography. What really caught my eye though was this interesting tree. It's missing about half of its bark. It already has a dark and moody feel to it, especially with the storm clouds in the background, but we're going to take that in the Lightroom, take it a step further and give it a really dark and moody feel. And I'm going to bring you guys along for the edit. So let's dive on into it. Here is the before photo. This is raw out of camera. One of the first things I want to do is I think this will look good in a 1:1 crop. We're going to crop it in pretty tight. Get rid of a lot of those distractions on the sides of the image. Something about like that. And I'm going to do a few local adjustments. I'm going to bring my exposure down some. Leave the contrast alone for now. I'm going to take the highlights down a little bit as well. Lift the shadows. Lift the whites until they just start to peak. Drop them back. And I'm going to drop the blacks. Crush the darkest shadows just a little bit. And that looks like a good starting point. Now we're going to add our contrast down here. I'm going to lift my black so that nothing is pure black. And then drop my shadows, lift my highlights. Something about like that there. So now we have our contrast taken care of. I'm going to dive into some masking. One of the first things I want to do, I'm going to brush in all this underbrush in the foreground and background. Try and make it a little less distracting, give it a little bit moodier feel. Not getting too in depth here. So once I got it all brushed in, I'm going to take my texture down and my clarity. I'm going to play with our sliders a little bit. Lift the shadows while dropping the blacks. Take the contrast out some. And lifted the exposure just a hair. I'm going to come back and paint it in a little more where there's more texture and just kind of draw your eye away from this stuff. So here we can see our mask, what we painted in. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to drop on a drop on a linear gradient from the bottom. And I want to darken up the very bottom of this image. That snow and stuff there really draws your eye in. And I want to negate that effect. So something about like that. Create another mask. This time we're going to do a radial gradient. I'm going to kind of put a spotlight on the bottom of the tree here. Make it look like the light was peeking through. There's some leaves there left over from fall. It still has some orange color to them. And with this moody, dark image, I think the orange coming through will look pretty good. So lift my exposure, lift my contrast, lift my shadows and my whites. Add just a little bit of warmth, +3, and 2 on the saturation. And just kind of move the light around, place it right where I want it. And come up here to the amount slider. I feel like the effect's a little too much. Dial it back to about 87. And there, I think that is looking pretty good. I'm going to create a new mask now. I'll focus on these lighter parts of the tree where the bark is missing. I'm just going to go and paint those in, resizing the brush with the mouse wheel. I have my auto mask on so it's not bleeding over into the sky or the darker parts of the tree much. I think that's a pretty good brush right there. I'm going to lift my exposure quite a bit. And I'm going to drop the saturation because I really want it to have just a white look to it. And I feel like the bark is already pretty dark, so it gives a nice pop against the white of the tree trunk. And overall, I'm liking that with the tree right now. So let's add a new mask. We're going to darken the top part of this sky. I'm going to drop the highlights first. Take the exposure down just a little bit. And I like that, but I don't like what it's done to the branches of the tree. It made them a little too dark to the point that it's unnatural. So we can come over here, hit the subtract button, click on color range, go to the bark, draw a little box. It'll subtract that bark from the dark mask of the sky. So now we got the eye getting drawn to the center of the image, but without darkening those branches. Add another radial gradient, this time right on our focus point. And just lift the exposure just a hair. And the temp just a little bit. All right, I think that is it for the masking. Actually, I'm going to add one more. I'm going to create a new mask. I want to adjust the sky here. So I did select sky, letting the AI do its thing. And as you can see, it selected the sky, but it's also selected a lot of the bark as well. So just like before, subtract color range. And it did pretty good. Bump it up just a hair so we get a little less of those branches. And now I'm going to work with the sky here. I want to take the texture in the sky down, give it that real dreamy look. And take the clarity down as well, down to about -61. Do a little bit of a negative dehaze. Drop the exposure just a little more. So now we got that real dreamy look in the sky. And I'm going to play with some color here. I feel like this blue leaning a little into the purple. So that's the color, but I'm going to dial it way back in saturation. About 22%. I'm going to lighten it up just a little more. And I'm digging that. So now we're going to come over here and play with our HSL sliders a bit. I want to bump up the orange saturation just a little and then drop most everything else. Kind of looking for a orange and black photo here. I think the luminous and hue on everything is about where I want it. So the last thing I want to do here is mess with our shadows, midtones, and highlights. I'll pump a little blue-green into the shadows. And bring down the luminance just a hair. I'm 9 on the saturation. It's kind of teal color here. I think I want to pump some greens into the mid-tones. I'm going to start with a high saturation, find the color I want, and then dial the saturation back. About 7%. Actually, let's go a little less. %. And take our highlights and do the same. Lift our saturation, find the color I'm looking for. Got it over here in a red leaning towards magenta, 6%. And took the luminance down just a hair. Come back over here where we can see what we did with all three. We got a little green in the midtones, a little teal in the shadows, and a little red in the highlights. Can play with our blending here and our balance. Want the balance a little bit more towards the highlight end. Now looking at the overall picture, we can come back to our basic sliders and make some adjustments if we want. I think I want to bring the shadows up just a little more. The blacks down. And I'm going to go back to our brush we put right in the middle on the tree. I'm going to emphasize it a little more, make it a little bigger. And there we go. That is my dark and moody photo edit on this interesting tree I found in the nature preserve. I hope you guys liked the video, got something out of it. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like and subscribe button. There is lots more to come. All right, thanks for watching.